All right, what's up, everybody? We are doing a short and casual live stream tonight just because I don't know, I felt like doing something for the 4th. I just got back from fireworks. Hello, everybody. Yeah, just got back from fireworks. They were not very impressive, I have to say. I mean, lots of them, but they were kind of dispersed, like in several places, so you didn't get the full effect of the big fireworks show here in town. But yeah, so I got back from that early, and I'm gonna go to bed soon. But I thought I would do a 4th of July, Happy 4th live stream. So hello, everybody. Super cash. Did not even really fix my hair, as you can see. But yeah, what's up, Michael Brown? Why are you not often able to make these? Are you in a different time zone, or you're at work maybe when I'm doing these? Because I do. Someone said the other day, they were like, "Why do you do so many of these like earlier in the day, or like right when people are getting home from work, or whatever?" So, but I mean, I've done some later ones too, so I'm not really sure what's up with that. But yeah, late night. We've got 19 people on. We might not have that many. What's up, Mel? We might not have that many, but that's okay. We can go over it in replay. People can watch it in replay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Rekieta and his interview, if you could call it that, with, is the guy's name Ethan Ralph, or is it Ralph Ethan? I'll tell you, one of the things that's been funny and interesting about this whole Rekieta situation is that, I'll fill you in real quick, Robin. We're not going to spend a long time on it, but there was something that happened recently. Tug actually was going over it on his show today. But one of the funny things about this whole Rekieta situation is that it's introduced me to an entire cast of characters that I had no idea. I'm talking about like online streamers that I had no idea even existed. And some of them are some colorful characters. So anyway, he went on, okay, thanks, AJ, Ralph Ethan. So Rekieta did his first interview. If you're not up on the Rekieta thing, it's not like a big story that a lot of people know unless you are a YouTuber or you're really into quote unquote law tube or what have you. But he was a big law tuber. You might say the law tuber, original law tuber, OG law tuber. And he covered the Rittenhouse trial, and he covered the Depp trial. And like Andrea Burkhart, who's been on my show, she went on the Rekieta show a lot and live streamed the Depp trial. So anyway, he's an attorney in Minnesota, and he got busted for what was arguably a lot of cocaine. You know, I have in my life, I've known a lot of people doing a lot of drugs, and I myself have definitely done some things. And the question of whether a gram, if that's truly how much they found, now there's some question of like whether the cops overestimated the amount and like with the packaging and everything. But let's say that they found a gram at his house. People have been talking about like that's a huge amount. That's almost like a trafficking amount. Well, it's definitely a very, very big amount for a beginner. But if one is partying a lot, or if one is doing it a lot, or maybe if one is having a lot of people over to one's home and partying a lot, then it's not as much as one might think. So I don't know. One of the things that'll be interesting in this whole situation is to see like how Rekieta's defense deals with the most compelling piece of evidence in this, which is the, bag of drugs that the cops found at his home. But what makes all of this complicated, and what makes this, I guess, a more serious story than it would be otherwise, it was just kind of like a libertarian issue of like, does someone have the right to do drugs in their home, is the fact that his kids were taken away from him. I mean, temporarily for the moment, right? But his kids were taken away, and there were allegations that the police, their labs say that his 9-year-old tested positive for cocaine for a pretty decent amount, indicating some kind of regular use. So, oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. I'll do something with my cats. Be right back. The cats are going crazy with, and you know how animals are. They're going crazy with all the fireworks going on because there's still a lot. You can hear it, right? You'll know how it is. But one cat less so, because one cat is deaf. It's old and it's almost completely deaf. So it's much less affected, but there is one that's like really freaked out. So anyway, that's what makes this more this thing like really serious with the Rekieta situation, is this question, of course. And of course he denies all of this, that the kids were in any danger, the kid was exposed to cocaine and all of this stuff. But you know, that's what's going to play out. And so it's not a big story for people who are not interested in this niche of a particular, you know, set of YouTubers. But in the YouTube world, this is like a big thing, right? Because this is like one of us. And even Tim Pool covered it a bit on his show. And I think what's interesting to me is that, you know, the social media world, it's rapidly evolving. And this is, to my knowledge, the first time, tell me if I'm wrong, but the first time that a social media figure with a pretty big audience, or a very big audience. I mean, Rekieta had, as I understand it, he had signed $1 million contract with Rumble. So like, we're not talking about me, you know, like amateur YouTuber bringing a little bit of money, you know, scraping by. Like he was doing really well. And so this is the first time, to my knowledge, that something like this has happened, where instead of, when someone gets busted, gets in trouble like this, instead of retreating and, you know, and saying, okay, I'm closing up shop and I'm going to focus on this legal stuff and focus on my family, he's very defiantly saying, nope, I'm going to keep the business going, keep the streaming going. I'm going to, he did an interview with this Ethan Ralph guy. He's doing streams on his locals on YouTube, on Rumble. So, and he's very defiant. And I'm not saying that I believe Rekieta, and I don't know Rekieta. So I have no idea who's telling the truth here or what's going on. I don't particularly trust the government, but also I don't particularly have any reason to trust Rekieta. I don't know him, right? And so, but he's being very defiant. And this is really the first time that I can think of where you have like a major social media figure who gets in a lot of shit, and has a lot of his viewers even turn on him, a number of them, you know, understandably, who said, you know what, I'm gonna keep doing all this, and, you know, basically kind of like, fuck you to my haters. So it's interesting. And I don't know, like, again, I don't know what to make of it, but I'm covering it because just personally, it's interesting to me. And I'll tell you something else that's interesting about this. And Tug was talking about this today. And Tim Pool was talking about this actually as well, is that we streamers, we really do, by the very nature of what we're doing, we really blur the line between private life and public life. You know, there's more of a defined line if you're like a Hollywood actor or something, or even to a degree a politician, because there are times in which, you know, you go to set or you go give a speech or whatever, but then your private time is your private time. And with streaming, because, and Tim Pool mentioned this, because we're streaming in our bedrooms now. I mean, this is not my bedroom, but we're streaming in our homes, in our private areas. Some people are streaming in their bedrooms. We're talking, you know, sometimes our family members come on camera, or people even have their kids on and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but like, they're really, and we talk about our personal lives a lot because we are the characters, right? It's not like I get on here and I play a character like George Clooney or someone would play a character. It's like I'm playing a version of myself, but it's supposed to be me, right? It is me. And so there's this interesting blurring of the line between public and private that is creating a number of these kind of strange scenarios, right? So like you had the YouTuber DSP, who I didn't even know who he was. I'd never watched him before. But through this Rekieta thing, I found out that there was this YouTuber who basically accidentally jerked off on camera because he was drunk and he forgot the camera was on or something like that, right? And so, like, you know, there's just all of this bleed through of private and public life. And so for people who are in some ways in their private lives living a little more on the edge, like Rekieta, you know, with seemingly living in a kind of a menage a trois, you know, a threesome with another woman, with his wife, and then living a party lifestyle and stuff. It's interesting because things come up. So that's why, you know, a number of you who are my fans of my Marilyn Manson work or Johnny Depp work or whatever, you might be puzzled as to why I've been covering this. But I just think, you know, it's interesting. And also on a personal level, like we YouTubers, we ask ourselves, like, how would we react in that situation? you know, because I'm not worried about the cops coming and busting down my door or whatever and finding a gram of coke. But everybody in their private life has issues, problems, weaknesses, drama, right? And so it's interesting to think about this question too of like drama from the real world erupting into your streaming. So I don't know, but here's what I wanted to talk about briefly with Rekieta. He has not done any interviews. He's done some streams, and he has talked some about his situation. Now, I'm sure that his attorneys don't like how much he's talking. He doesn't answer all questions, and he tries not to get into the specifics much. But I mean, he definitely, I think, has been talking about his case and the situation. But he has not done any interviews. And so he did his first interview with someone. And y'all, I am just baffled as to why he chose this person. No offense to this person, but Tug showed the interview today. I think it ended up getting pulled off of Rumble, right? Didn't Ralph pull it because people were like, "Oh my God," because he was so fucked up on camera, or I don't know. That's what people were saying on Twitter. But this guy, this Ethan Ralph guy, that hey Vanessa and thanks to my mods as always, Vanessa and AJ, and I don't know if Rebel Bird's here or Laura, but thanks to them as well. They've done double duty today actually because they were on Tug's multi-hour live stream. So I admire y'all who really love to stream and love to mod, and you get a lot of shit for it too. They get not so much on my show, but they get a lot of shit I see on Tug's channel. Because the thing is mods, and y'all know this, they have to edit out or delete certain comments that could violate YouTube's terms of service, right? It's not so much about wanting to keep the space clean, but like there are things that you're just not supposed to be saying, or you can get in trouble on YouTube. And so they're having to delete a lot of stuff. And there are people I noticed on Tug's stream. This is the second time now I've seen this on Tug's stream. They just constantly are bitching at the mods. Constantly, and we're being censored and all of that. It's just so I would get sick of that. I couldn't deal with that, but hats off to y'all. But anyway, here's the point though, is this Ralph Ethan or Ethan Ralph guy, he, for some reason, he got Rekieta's first interview, and y'all, like, no judgment here, except it was just like a crazy circus to watch it, but he was so fucked up. And I'm not talking about fucked up like, obviously tipsy or, maybe a little jazzed up on something or whatever. Like he was constantly slurring, and there would be these long pauses, and Tug would even say like, there's not a break here. There's just, they're just pausing. And it was probably the most inarticulate, I would say, intoxicated interview that I have ever seen. I mean, I'm just serious. Like the only way that it could have been worse on the host end, on this Ralph guy's end, is if he just like passed out or just completely like couldn't finish sentences. But again, I'm not saying that to like diss him per se, but it was puzzling to me why Rekieta chose this guy. I know that everybody's asked him for an interview to come on their show. I mean, me too. But it's really puzzling to me why Rekieta chose this guy. And I was thinking, well, did he choose this guy because people would be so distracted at how like fucked up the host was that maybe Rekieta would look better in comparison? I mean, Rekieta seemed totally sober. People were speculating on if he was drinking something in his opaque cup, but he seemed totally sober. But this other guy, it was like, and I don't have the energy. I don't feel like tonight, like going through and trying to find clips to show you, but I really think I'm going to do like some kind of a shorter, like parody video, like making fun of it, honestly. Cause I mean, the guy, like he's left himself open to being lampooned. It was ridiculous. And so it was funny too in Tug's chat, because Tug was showing, if you want to see this interview after you're finished here, go to That Umbrella Guy, because he showed most of the interview and with commentary. But if you look in the chat, I mean, people were just constantly saying, is the host drunk? What is the host on? Some people were saying he has a speech impediment, which he might, but like that couldn't account for this level of ridiculousness. So again, I mean, it's fine. It was entertaining, but I was very perplexed as to why Rekieta chose that one. And so, I sent him a DM on Twitter, and I said it was interesting strategy choosing a host who was high on heroin to counteract your, the accusations of cocaine use on your part. I'm not saying he was on that, by the way. People were saying that he's a big fan of Xanax and alcohol, and I don't know, right? And I don't care. Again, I don't care, but that was funny for those who saw it. So here, but I don't actually feel like Rekieta disclosed anything. I mean, to me, it was really just a repeat of what he said on his locals program and YouTube before, which is that he denies that his children were exposed to anything, that they were in any danger. I don't know if he denies that he had drugs. He probably would deny the amount that they found. But I mean, Rekieta is alleging that there's some kind of malfeasance on the part of the cops and CPS and the prosecutors. Who knows, y'all? I mean, who knows? Like, I'm just so out of my realm with this stuff, with this legal stuff. I would be not surprised to find out that labs fuck up drug tests all the time. I would not be surprised to find out that gossipy neighbors and church members got, CPS all riled up, and that basically, they're making mountains out of molehills. But also, I would not be surprised to learn that someone was doing a ton of coke and his life got out of control and stuff, right? So, who knows? But whatever is the case, I hope that what's best happens. But anyway, that's what was going on there. But he really didn't say much of anything new. But of course, then again, the host was so ineffectual. People were saying this is like the worst interview ever. I can't stand to listen to this. I mean, that was the main comment on Tug's stream of it. So I don't know. I do not know. But like I said, this Rekieta thing has introduced me to a cast of characters that are interesting, to say the least. The thing that and then I'm going to move on to something else, but the thing that I do continue to say in Rekieta's defense, partial defense, because if his kids are in danger, if they're being neglected, if one of them is doing cocaine, there's no way I can defend that, nor would I want to, right? And so there needs to be some kind of intervention. I don't know what, there needs to be some kind of intervention or change. But I will say that it seems there's such a stigma attached. It's interesting. There's such a stigma attached to certain drugs, particularly like cocaine, that's not attached to something like Adderall or Vyvanse, which, society just totally condones having. And I'm not trying to step on any of your toes out here, but I'm just saying society totally condones lots of people and lots of kids being on speed. I mean, that's what it is, speed, right? And as someone who's had experience with these things, I find the effects of coke not different from the effects of Adderall or Vyvanse, except the latter lasts longer. Now, I know with coke and with street drugs, you have the significant issue of adulterants, and to me that's like a huge problem, right? And so you don't know what you're getting, and it's not, there's fentanyl in a lot of this stuff now, and just all kinds of other stuff. I mean, just nasty stuff that's cut into these street drugs. So, it's not good. There's no way to defend that. It's not good. But I do think that there is a kind of a double standard in that people are like, oh, you snort it up your nose. Ooh, it's this powder. Ooh, you get it on the street, that sort of thing. But then they're happy to take a pill or give their kids a pill that basically has more or less the same effects on the body and the brain, right? I mean, and again, we're talking about adulterants in the product. It's different, but just in general. But that's really as far as as much as I have to say on that. So anyway, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I would like to do a parody of that interview, because he was it's like he'd be like, and his eyes were kind of closed sometimes, and he would say I mean, I don't want to I don't want to make you say anything that you don't want to say, but I mean, how is this, how has it been, man? That was basically it. That was my impression of it. Oh man. So what else is up? 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. Always a lot of interesting memes that I see, patriotic, non-patriotic. I've seen a lot of videos of Marilyn Manson wiping his ass with the American flag at a concert. I mean, I get what he's doing with that. I mean, I support his right to free expression, and I get the point that he's making. It is kind of gross video, though. I don't know if I want to see it again. It does kind of just gross me out on like a physical level. Of course, there's also what Manson is wearing when he's doing that. At least the clip that I keep seeing, he's wearing that weird like part lingerie, part corset with the jock strap on the outside, and then his hair is real like greasy and long. And it's just not his best look, intentionally, quite intentionally, I'm sure. But it's not his best look. And then he takes the flag and he's like, he doesn't just wipe his ass, but he really like, gets it up in there, right? So just to make sure that that the flag is being like fully desecrated. I mean, I get the point. I get why he did it. It doesn't offend me. But it is kind of gross. Yeah. But I've seen a lot of memes with that. And then a lot of like, cheerful patriotic memes and so forth. But I feel like the 4th of July it's hitting pretty hard this year because the state of our country, it just feels so bad. I mean, I'm sure objectively there have been times when we were more imperiled or worse off, but like the Civil War, I guess, was a more difficult time for our nation. But man, it just seems like we are up quite a creek and in uncharted waters, I would have to say, uncharted waters in a number of ways for our country right now. Because basically, as people have said, no matter which candidate you like or you don't like any of them or whatever, we now have a choice between a candidate that a lot of people, maybe even a majority of people now think does have some degree of dementia and is not fully capable of doing the job. And then we have another candidate that is, whether you think it's justified or not, has been, is entrenched right now in these battles in the court system and has all of this mud on him, and a significant portion of the country thinks is a criminal of some kind. And it's like, it really is. I mean, I know there have been times when we've had other bad options of candidates to choose from, but it really does feel like this is uncharted waters to have two candidates that have so much baggage on them, right? Basically. And, again, I'm in Texas here. I know a lot of people who love Trump. I used to like Trump a lot more than I do now, just because I feel like he really bungled a lot of things with COVID. And I don't want to get into all of that. And then, also, I mean, I fully concede there are ways in which he is ridiculous. But I used to like him more. I still probably vote for him. I would vote for him over Biden. I would. But I think it would be better if we had other options. Like, I think, he served, move on, but this is what we've got. We've got Trump or Biden, unless Biden drops out. It seems like he's resistant to that. And here's the thing, y'all, that I see. There are two reasons why Trump is polling ahead of Biden, in addition to this whole issue of whether or not Biden has dementia. And I think that a lot of people feel like there are aspects of the left that have gone too far. People talk about woke and stuff like that, right? That there are a number of ways in which people really want to have the government kind of off their back. And they think that, rightly or wrongly, that Trump would be more likely to do that, right? Would be a more sort of libertarian type candidate. Now, there are things that I'm very pro-choice. And so I'm very negative on the Republican conservative perspective on abortion rights, right? But I'm just saying, like, in general, people who are more libertarian, I would say, tend to see the left as being pretty authoritarian. And then also you have the fact that, right or wrong, there are all kinds of negative developments in the country that the left is seemingly tied to, like the decline of our cities. I'm amazed that people are talking about Gavin Newsom as a credible presidential candidate, because it seems like he's so tied to California. And it's just California, you just constantly now hear and see people talking about how California has gone to shit. and our cities under Democrats have gone to shit, et cetera, right? And so I think that I think people, a number of people, are really concerned about stuff like that, and they feel like voting for a more conservative president could be a kind of a course correction. And then there's the immigration thing, um, which, sorry, give me 30 seconds. Was that 30? There's the immigration thing, which I'll tell you, 20 years ago, I lived in Texas most of my life, was born here, raised here. I did go to school in North Carolina for a while, but came back. I've lived in Texas most of my life, and and for all that time, people around here have been concerned about illegal immigration, much more concerned than the rest of the nation for obvious reasons, right? Like, we are the front lines. And we have seen the effects, I think, of the negative effects of illegal immigration more until recently than other parts of the country. Now, because of, busing of illegal immigrants, and you have a lot of illegal immigrants now in cities, in towns all over the country, people are becoming more aware. But in Texas, this has always been a big deal. And it used to be, though, that outside of really conservative people or people in Texas, it seems like most people otherwise were not concerned about illegal immigration, and even thought that it was racist to have an issue with illegal immigration, right? So there was the idea that, if you don't want people to be immigrating to your country in an orderly, systematic fashion, I'm sorry, if you want that and you don't want people coming in illegally, then you must be a racist. Because really what it is you just don't want brown and black people coming in, right? And that was, I think, the assumption by a lot of people, particularly non-conservatives, people outside of Texas, was that this was just basically a racist thing, right? And that people who cared about immigration were just racist. And what has happened now is that I think that they're not with everybody, obviously, but I think there's been an awakening on the part of a number of people, the fact that no, actually, like this, in large numbers, this brings significant problems, and that our country, in the ailing and declining state that it's in right now, it can't handle it. It's just not practical. And the analogy that I've always used with people, because I was in academia for a long time, and so most of my friends were not only liberal but extremely liberal, woke, progressive, right? And the way that I would try to explain it to them is, why do you lock your doors at night? I mean, just as a serious question, why do you lock your doors at night? And also, why don't you let anybody who wants to come in, homeless people or whatever, anybody who wants to come in and take shelter in your home and eat your food and whatever? Why don't you do that? I mean, we're all human beings, right? Nobody has a right to, why do you have a right to certain things in your house and others don't, right? And of course, when they think about it, if they give you an honest answer, what they'll say is, well, I don't have enough resources. If everybody came into my house, then they would take all of my food and stuff. And also my house would get crowded, and eventually it would deteriorate, and the whole situation would deteriorate for everyone, right? And that is basically, I know it's not a perfect analogy, but on a larger scale, that is, I think, how a lot of people now feel about immigration, is they see that, as much as in a perfect world, we would like to take in everybody and give everybody the opportunities that they want in this country. Yes, no race of people is better or more entitled than another, but practically speaking, what's going to happen is it will cause the deterioration of life here for those of us who are here, and overload systems, and also bring in problematic elements, criminals who are not being effectively screened out. So I think that one of the big things that's happened over the last 4 years is that this idea has gone mainstream, and this concern has gone mainstream. And so there is one party and one candidate that is well positioned for that, and one that is not. And people can laugh at the wall, or they laughed at the wall when Trump wanted to build the wall, years ago. People aren't laughing now. You have even Democrats, some Democrats suggesting that we need to have better barriers. And so what's happened is what used to be this idea about immigration that Trump had, it used to be considered more racist. And now you have a lot of people who are coming around and they're saying, well, even if I may not like Trump and he may say some crazy, stupid shit at times, but he's the one most likely to do something about this. And then there's another party that seems uninclined to do something about it or non-serious about it. Vanessa says, Colonel, Keeley asked you in a chat why you're laser focused on Marilyn Manson. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm about to get to that, actually. Thank you. That's a good segue, because I didn't even want to talk about immigration. So yeah, let me get to the point, basically, though, with the Trump Biden thing. I understand, and some of you in my audience will say this. They'll say, well, Biden, okay, he might have some cognitive issues, and some people say he doesn't, that we're just misreading him. But people say, well, he might have some cognitive issues, but look at Trump. And the problem with that is that Trump may be shady. He may even be criminal. I don't know, but he may be shady. He may be criminal. He may be in a number of ways a despicable human being, what have you. But people respect strength in a leader, and they need, first and foremost, a sense of strength in a leader. And weakness is just a killer. It's just, even if you think about like wolves, in a pack, and like the alpha male's got to be strong. He doesn't have to be nice, but he's got to be strong. He's got to be a tough motherfucker. And, one of the things that these trials that Trump has been going through, and these political persecutions, whether justified or not, but I call them persecutions. One of the benefits for Trump is that it's shown him to be a fighter and a tough motherfucker. Even if not a good person, but a fighter and a tough motherfucker. And people on an instinctual level, a lot of them would rather have that than someone who seems weak. And so it's not that I don't think that Trump never says crazy shit, or that he doesn't have his own moments where you think, hello, but people saw him up on that stage with Biden, and it was a clear difference that one person is at this point a tougher motherfucker than the other. So that's the problem. The thing people have to realize too is that we have kind of a respect for criminals in a way, in the sense that, how many of you love gangster movies? How many of you love a really great villain in a movie? Because there's something even morally distasteful, but there's something like that exudes like a Nietzschean sort of strength there, right? And so I think that's also what some people on the left are missing, is when they keep saying, well, Trump's a criminal, or Trump's shady, or he didn't pay enough taxes, or this or that, or even, the grab him by the pussy or whatever. That's not necessarily a downside, that stuff, because in a weird way, it can code as a kind of strength in people's minds. And I'm not saying it's right, but people want a tough leader above all. I just think they do. And so that is why I think the Democrats should pull Biden, and they should put someone else in. I don't think Kamala Harris is going to do it either. I don't think Gavin Newsom is going to do it. I don't know. Can Barack Obama come back? I know you can't serve more than 2 consecutive terms, but can you serve a third non-consecutive? Because that man exuded strength. He really did, but also a kind of integrity, even if people disagree with some of his ideas. And the other thing that people have to remember is that most people assume that politicians are all criminal to some degree. And so, it's not like Trump in being up against Biden, he's up against this saint. All this stuff, Hunter Biden has kind of run his dad through the mud by association. And then there's all of these other things that kind of questionable, some associations that Biden has had, and the money that his family has made while he's been in office and all that. And I don't know that he's actually done anything criminal, but I'm just saying people in general think that pretty much all politicians are scumbags. And particularly someone who has been in politics for decades is more apt in their minds to be a scumbag. And so when people say, oh, Trump is a criminal, it's like, I feel like there's almost a kind of a canceling out that occurs there in a lot of people's minds. So we will see what happens with that. But, that whole thing, it's bringing a lot of people down psychologically in terms of the way they're perceiving our nation. And then y'all, there's the massive debt. I mean, my God, the debt. And I know we, the debt has been something that I've been hearing about since I was a little girl. But like, if you look at an inflation adjusted graph of how much deficit and spending we're doing, and how much we've run up the debt, like it's beyond what we did in World War I, World War II. It's beyond, I mean, anything. And it really started with George W. Bush and all of the money that he blew after 9/11 with all of those wars and the military and all of that stuff. And then tax cuts, which I'm not against tax cuts in theory, but like, you also need to exercise some fiscal restraint too. And so, like, that's when it started. And then with Obama, when you had the 2008 recession, then you had the Fed and the Treasury just basically going on a spending spree in various ways, and just kind of flooding us with money, so to speak, and propping up Wall Street and bailing out, huge bailouts and all of that. Y'all remember that, some of the stuff, right? And so then it got worse, and then COVID happened, and it seemed like COVID just gave our politicians almost a blank check to just say, okay, we'll just run up the debt as much as we need to. So we are now at the point, and I know some of you know this, but like, we are now at the point where we are paying more on the interest of the debt than we are on Social Security. Like, if you look at a pie chart of like yearly spending, it's like a full, like over a fourth now of our spending, or almost a fourth, is like interest on the debt and growing. So like, that is just, the debt has always been a thing, but I really hear now and see now a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, and people in the business world and Wall Street and economists and Warren Buffett, and just tons of people saying, okay, like, we are kind of starting to get down to the wire with some, like, we actually need to start doing something about this. And because of a fundamental flaw in democracy, there's no incentive for anyone to do anything about it, right? Because to get elected, you have to get votes, right? And you generally get votes by promising shit to people, or by promising not to take away their shit. And so if you think about, like the fact that we have an aging baby boomer population, it's going to need, Medicare, Social Security service, money, services, all of that, right? Those things are just going to keep growing. And so politicians are not incentivized to either cut benefits, say, no, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move the retirement age up to this. You're going to have to wait this many years now to get your Social Security. We're going to have to reduce your Medicare benefits, reduce the amount you get with Social Security. I mean, these things suck, right? So politicians don't want to do that. And then they don't want to raise taxes, because that's not popular with anybody, right? So they don't want to do that. So what does that leave? It leaves debt. And so that's the problem, with democracy. Not that there's anything better that we've got, I guess, in terms of a system, like, what was it Churchill said, right? It's like the best of a bunch of shitty systems. But that's one of the problems with it, is that when politicians depend on people for votes, then they can't do things that people don't like. They can't, it's like if your parent, you're a teenager or in college, and your parent gives you a credit card, and then you run it up, and then like, it's not good for your parent to just keep paying it, right? But that's what we're doing, basically. So, and then there's inflation, and there's just a sense, I think, that people have, that we are actually now really on the precipice of actual real decline as a nation. And I know people, to a degree, always kind of feel that way. Like, every generation is like, oh, it's not like it was in the good old days, and I just don't know about this world. And like, my grandma would always say, I'm so glad that I'm going to be dead soon, so I won't have to see all what's going to happen to the world. She was this old crotchety lady from Louisiana, Cajun, farmer's wife, farmer's daughter, real no bullshit or whatever. And she would say that a lot. She'd say, I'm just so glad I'm going to be dead soon, so I don't have to see all of this. So I don't know. All of that to say, happy 4th of July, everyone. Oh man, you know what I tell myself though when I get like too far out and like and worrying about stuff or feeling bad about stuff? I say to myself, but you know what? Like my grandma, I will be dead in several decades, and so why worry about it? Just try to enjoy the ride. Much easier said than done. But anyway, somebody asked before I start talking about the other stuff. I'm going to talk about Manson in a second, and I'm going to talk about RFK. There was a crazy article that came out, RFK Jr. A crazy article that came out in Vanity Fair, like that just ripped him to shreds for some stuff, like supposedly eating a dead dog in Asia and some sexual harassment, assault, things like that. What is with the politicians and the dogs this year, by the way? Kristi Noem bragging about shooting her dog, and then she was surprised and that didn't go over well. Anyway, I want to talk about that. There's a little bit of Rammstein news for anyone who cares, and then that'll probably be it. But somebody asked me, though, about the Robert De Niro photo. That is from Cape Fear. That's on my thumbnail. That is from Cape Fear, one of my favorite movies. And I wish I had more time to make videos about my favorite movies, but I don't. But if I did, I would love to talk about that because I used to teach that in college. I used to teach that very regularly, that film by Scorsese, Cape Fear. It is a remake, but Scorsese does a lot of different stuff with it in his version. So I much prefer his version. But De Niro is, talk about a badass villain, a scary villain in that movie. And so, anyway, I'm going to show you the trailer for that because I want to talk just a bit about some stuff from that, and then we'll move on. But give me a second here. I'm going to pull up the trailer. I'll be back in like 20 seconds. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go away for take a little break, bathroom break for a minute. But this is watch this if you're not familiar with this movie because I want to say a few things that I think you'll find entertaining in a moment. Okay.
Hi, Dad. You look tired.
Oh, thanks. I needed that.
Hola. This town is so very nice, and everything's just so very, very nice. See, somebody's out there.
What's your connection with this fella?
I was his lawyer.
Oh, it's a shackles on that, right?
And what was he in prison for?
No, really. What did you do? Have you been following me? It's a small town. Every way you turn, I guess we're gonna run into each other.
Dad, you should have just punched him out. Yeah, you know how to fight. Where do you do that for a living?
This guy, he threatened you?
He's clever, so that the law can't touch him.
You have a daughter around 16?
16? What?
Mom, come out wherever you are.
I want you the hell off my property! You son of a...
You, son, will be hearing from the ethics committee.
We got this freaking psychopath in our faces. I mean, who knows what's true and what isn't?
I'm just losing my mind here. I called the vet, and then he died.
I told you not to let him out.
I didn't let him out! You didn't let him out!
It would be unethical of me to advise a citizen to take the law into his own hands.
You thought about me last night, didn't you? Evening, ladies.
Hello?
I think we're alone now.
Where are you from?
I'm from the Black Forest. Maybe I'm a big bad wolf. Do you mind if I put my arm around you?
Okay. So I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, because you should check it out. It's actually one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite Scorsese movies. And unfortunately, that trailer had really bad background music, which really took away, I think, from the experience. But the music, the score in the actual film, it's wonderful. They do this retro thing to make it sound like an old, like, Hitchcock thriller, and they use some of the music from the original Cape Fear, the original, like, film noir music, and so the music is really great too. But without spoilers, the basic premise is that you have this lawyer played by Nick Nolte, and he has a dysfunctional family, a dysfunctional relationship with his wife, dysfunctional relationship with his angsty teenage daughter, played by Juliette Lewis. And it turns out that he's a very successful lawyer in the South. And it turns out that early in his career, when he was working as a public defender, he was assigned the case of Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro was accused of violently raping and beating the shit out of a woman. And basically what happened, and again, this is not a big spoiler, but what happened in the past is that Nolte's character, the lawyer, he thought that De Niro was such a bad guy that he did some shady stuff as his lawyer to make sure that he would stay behind bars, that he would be convicted, which you're not supposed to do if you're defending someone, right? And he figured that De Niro would never find out about it, because De Niro, when he defended him, he was this, like, illiterate hick, right? At one point someone calls him a cracker in the film. He was this illiterate hick. Well, this is what you find out early on in the film, is that while he was in prison, De Niro not only learned how to read, but became extremely literate and looked into his case files and figured out what his lawyer had done, how he had shafted him. And so when De Niro gets out of prison at the beginning of the film, he decides that he's going to get revenge by going after the main guy's friends and Nick Nolte's friends and family, and just, like, basically, like, making their lives hell, torturing some of them, et cetera, et cetera. Now, so the scene on my thumbnail at the parade is, there's a scene on the 4th of July where Nick Nolte takes his family, the lawyer takes his family out to this parade, and he's followed by Robert De Niro's menacing character. And so at one point he looks over and he sees De Niro's there, waving his flag and just, like, grinning at him stuff menacingly. So yeah, I won't give away, like, any more than that. But I loved teaching this film because it had a number of interesting thematic ideas. A lot of it was interested in the Book of Job. In fact, there's several really explicit references to the Book of Job. I mean, at one point, Nick Nolte's character even reads from the Book of Job, and De Niro's quotes the Book of Job, and so forth. And so basically, the larger theme of the film is that because Nick Nolte, the lawyer, has this dysfunctional relationship with his family, with his wife and with his kid, and you see it really goes into a lot of detail about that. And he's cheated on his wife before, et cetera, right? And his kid hates him. Because he has this dysfunctional family, he actually needs an exterior threat. He needs something to actually threaten the family and put them through suffering, so that through suffering, they can be purified and come out strong at the end. I mean, that's a pretty explicit theme, because at one point, Robert De Niro's character says to Juliette Lewis, the teenager, he says, "I'm helping your daddy. I love your daddy. I pray for him. I'm trying to make him a better man." And of course, he doesn't actually literally mean that. He's pissed off and he's trying to make his life a living hell and get revenge. But that is one of the larger interesting themes of the film, is the idea that going the question of Job and suffering, right? But going through this suffering and basically being put through the ringer by this psychotic Robert De Niro, his family is able to come together and basically work through, and he's able to work through his own character issues, right? So that's kind of, I would teach it not only as a thriller, and it's an interesting film and has a ton of really interesting film techniques. Scorsese really did some outlandish stuff in terms of some of the shots and the photography, and like I said, even the music. So you should definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. De Niro was nominated for a Best Actor award that year, and he lost to Michael Douglas for Wall Street, which Michael Douglas was amazing in Wall Street. But there was a part of me that kind of felt like De Niro was shafted, and he should have gotten that award. I think that was who he lost out to. Anyway, I think it's De Niro's best performance. De Niro's, he has been in a ton of films, and I love a lot of his movies. Some of them I don't like so much, but I think it was definitely his best performance, and he's really frightening. I mean, he's really scary in it. So yeah, I love to teach that film, but you know what? It's a hard watch, and there are some intense scenes and a couple of scenes of like sexual assault, women getting beaten up and stuff. And so, you know, that was one that was I had to have in my college classes. I don't like trigger warnings, but I did have a talk with my students when I would teach this and other things in the film classes that I would teach in college. I would have a talk with them the first day of class, and I would say, you know, I understand some people can handle different levels of violence and some people can't, and people have been through things in their own lives and they can get, you know, quote unquote triggered and so forth. But I just want you to know that, like, we're going to be watching a lot of intense stuff in here. And I'm not one of these people that thinks that needs to be apologized for or worked around. And so if you are not okay with that, you should take something else, because, you know, not everybody can handle the same level of horror, so to speak, or negative stimulation. But so most of the time I didn't get too many complaints, but there were times when some students would say, "Oh, that film, that was a lot. You were right. That was pretty rough." Anyway, but it's interesting film. Okay, so somebody asked, was it Kaylee? Somebody asked, why am I so interested in the Manson stuff, and why has this become basically my main thing on my YouTube channel? And you know, I started off doing the Johnny Depp stuff, as y'all know, and then 3 weeks into starting my channel and doing the Johnny Depp stuff, then these allegations came out against Manson. And I wasn't even going to cover it. And I've talked about this before. I wasn't even going to cover it, but I just had this feeling. I don't know. It's like, it sounds kind of silly when you try to make something mystical out of it. But I just had this, sometimes in life, you have this feeling you're supposed to do something. And I just had this really strong feeling that I needed to look into this. Now, at that point, I wasn't thinking it was going to be like a multi-video or multi-year exercise on my part. But I just had this feeling for some reason. And I think what it was is that this, I thought, was the first time that we had seen a hyper-coordinated effort involving multiple women and as it turns out, people in the government, you know, state senators and so forth, and the media, a hyper-coordinated effort by multiple people to bring someone down, to cancel them. And outside of politics, I mean, I think in politics you see that a lot more, right? But this was, in a lot of ways, you know, the Me Too stuff had still been targeted. Mostly, it had been like individual women. I mean, the Weinstein thing, that was different because he was just such an animal who apparently was just tearing his way through Hollywood, right? So there were, like, you know, big stars like Gwyneth Paltrow and stuff who were calling him out. But the Manson thing, to me, it just felt different in some way. It felt like this is kind of a canary in the coal mine of something new. This is new. And the other thing is, I wasn't going to cover it. I was resistant to covering it until I saw some of the interviews, or saw or read some of the interviews with the accusers early on, particularly Esme Bianco, the Game of Thrones actress, who she did a bunch of interviews, and she written and video interviews. And when I watched her, I really got the sense that this was just really bullshit. There were so many things in that interview that she said in those interviews that I could see through. And so that, you know, when that happened, then I went back and I looked at Evan Rachel Wood's claims, and I found out that I saw that she had testified twice in California Assembly and in the US Congress about her supposed experience with Manson. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is a big deal. You know, she testified. And all of these women came out on the same day too. That was the thing. Like with the Weinstein thing, it was, even though there were a couple of big articles that really broke it open, it was still to some degree like a process that evolved over a number of weeks or months with finding out new stuff about him or new allegations. But the Manson thing, to me, it was outside of politics. It was the first time that I had felt with this whole Me Too situation that this was an extensive coordinated hit with multiple people who had clearly been conspiring and conferring and planning well before this. And so you had, some of y'all remember this if you were following it, you had on that one day, was it February 2nd, 2021? You had on that one day, like all of these different women come out on their Instagram. And then in the weeks after that, some of them did interviews. And so to me, it just had the feeling, kind of like what I was saying with Rekieta in a different context. It just had the feeling of something like new, like this is a bigger deal than people realize at first. And because I had such a sort of a weird or negative or problematic feeling about what I was reading and what I was seeing, it seemed really fishy to me, then that spurred me on to then look into it more. But I think that the question is, why am I looking? There are a number of men that I think have been falsely accused with this Me Too stuff. And there are a number of media stories where I feel like there's an injustice that's done and people don't understand something or whatever. And why so much time on the Manson thing? And I think one reason is that because I was first, I wasn't first on the Johnny Depp thing. I was well behind a lot of other people on that. But because I was first on the Manson thing, and maybe not the first one to figure out there was a problem, I'm sure there were other people who did, but the first person to actually publicly start speaking out about it, it then enabled me to get a lot of interviews with a lot of key players that I would not have been able to get otherwise. And so it was not soon after I started doing the Manson videos, poking holes in the accuser stories and talking about why I was concerned that he seemed likely to be innocent or perhaps innocent. Then I had people approaching me. I mean, most of the interviews I've done have been people actually approaching me. And so some of you might remember I got that huge breakthrough with Paula, Manson's longtime assistant and friend, who actually approached me and said that she would like to do an interview because she had tried to do an interview with the mainstream media and even with more tabloid media, because, that would be the obvious thing to do, is to try to get more reach, right? And nobody was interested. So like there was a time when I was literally the only person with any kind of public platform, even as small as it was and is. I was the only person who was willing to give a voice and a platform to people who were speaking out against this and people who had another side of the story to tell. So I got the interview, with Manson's assistant. That was a big deal. And then after that, there were other interviews with other people. And so that's part of it. But I will say, maybe to answer your question, I think you're actually getting at more specifically. I think the question I've asked myself at times is, why am I continuing to spend so much time on a subject that, no offense to Manson or Manson fans, but at this point, it's still kind of a niche topic. It doesn't have nearly the appeal or interest that like the Johnny Depp thing had. Because, Manson, he was not, when these allegations came out, he was in a declining period of his career, right? I mean, he was still touring and he still, was making great albums and had a lot of fans and stuff. But Johnny Depp, when this stuff with Amber Heard happened, I mean, he was still at the height of his career. I mean, they were going to make more Pirates of the Caribbean movies and stuff like that, right? Like he was still like at the top. And again, no insult to Manson, but it's just that in the music world, even if someone is hugely culturally important and a great artist, it's harder, I think, to stay on top. It's very rare to have like a Rolling Stones situation where, and even with them, like, you have they're not putting out as much music, or they're not making the charts, right, as they did, decades ago, right? So I have asked myself at times, this is such a niche topic, and even if I had like every Marilyn Manson fan watching my stuff, it's still not big enough to like actually like really break through, the way I would like to with my videos. And so I've asked myself at times, why am I continuing to do something, to focus so much time and energy on something when it seems like it's got a pretty defined ceiling in the number of people who are interested, right? And what I keep coming back to is, and this, again, this could sound like silly and mystical or something, but I have this feeling that Manson has a big third act in him in some way that I can't even necessarily exactly foresee. But I have this feeling, like his first act was when he came on the scene and he, was on MTV and Sweet Dreams and Antichrist Superstar and all of that. And then that carried over through the 90s and into the early 2000s, right? So that was like his first act. His second act is now the downfall, right? The Greek tragedy of someone who was, high, like falling now and being despised by a lot of people and being put through the ringer with the legal stuff and all of that. And Me Too. And so I have this feeling that he, at some point, is not going to just get back to where he was before this stuff happened, where, yeah, he's doing some touring and he's releasing albums. But I really feel like there is, and I don't know what it's going to be, but there is something coming down the road that some kind of cultural moment or cultural issue, or I don't even know, but there's something that later on down the road will make him hyper relevant, very relevant again, and put him in the news, and also have a sort of a greater market again for his art. And I don't know why I feel that way. I mean, it's just a feeling. And so a lot of what I do is just running on a feeling, but I've just always had this feeling that this was someone who in some way, even though I didn't understand all of his music or his art, or there were things, like the American flag, wiping himself with the American flag, it kind of grossed me out, that this was someone who was not just any popular artist, and that if he had the power to really break into the culture at one point in such a way that even people who didn't listen to his music or whatever still like had an opinion on him, and he was culturally important, that he can do that again, that he will do that again in some way. Now, I had hoped, and this is why I got upset last summer. I don't know how many of you remember this, but last summer I did a live stream where basically, I sort of chewed Manson out for like an hour and a half. And it was, I felt like in making that live stream, I was burning bridges there with a number of people, but I was very frustrated, and I felt like it was some things that I needed to say. What I said in that live stream is that I felt like I did not see how he was going to become hyper or very relevant again, or very important, or have that third act that I'm wanting him to have, if he doesn't do interviews and talk about this stuff and basically take advantage of the opportunity that Me Too and his accusers have given him, because they've given him a spotlight and they've given him something that is current. It's not the old arguments that he was having with, the Christian right, or Bob Dole and Joseph Lieberman a while back, or people accusing him of, contributing to Columbine or whatever. That stuff was interesting and important, but that was a while back, right? But this Me Too stuff, this is of the moment, and it's current, and it's something that I really wanted him to sink his teeth into more. And I was discouraged that he kept settling stuff. I should say kept settling. He settled with Esme Bianco, and he settled with Chloe Black. And then there's still some other things in the works, but I really wanted him to take something to trial, because I really do think that he's innocent of this stuff. Not a perfect person, but innocent of this stuff. And so I was frustrated because he was settling these things, and I had heard that he had been given some opportunities to do some big interviews with some favorable people and so forth, and that wasn't happening. And I just felt like, God, you're squandering this opportunity. And I think that some people thought that was frustration, that frustration was coming out of something selfish on my part. And I saw your super chat. If I'll try not to forget it. If I do, one of my mods point me back to it in a little while. I'm sorry. We went out. I know, kind of gross, and my voice is messed up. We went out for fireworks, and I got an allergy. We both got really bad allergies from it, and then mosquito bites, which was not pleasant. here in Texas. The mosquitoes are horrible. Anyway, I think some people thought that that I was coming at that rant or that live stream that I did where I was very upset with Manson, that I was coming at that from a selfish angle, like I need this to be a bigger story so that then my videos will blow up and I'll be more important and all of that. And you can never separate self-interest from anything. I mean, so I could even say, well, consciously that's not what it was, but who knows unconsciously, right? So I don't know. But really what I felt was just a sense of like, this could be something really interesting and really just big and cool to be a part of, and also like good for him. And I just really felt like there was an opportunity there that needed to be grasped, and it was not being. But, you know, and then the other part of that too, of my being frustrated, was I just didn't think that he would be able to go on tour, or that he would find people to back him or to let him release music or tour or whatever. I just thought he was more in the doghouse, frankly, than he was. Like, I just thought he was like fucking canceled, you know? And so my feeling was, you know, like, what is this? Like, you're just letting them just beat you to the ground. And then, and what, you know? But what I've seen since then is that, first of all, he has, I guess, behind the scenes, obviously been able to line up shows and concerts, and he's got music coming out, and he's got some people backing him and so forth. So I was wrong about that. And also just that, you know, his life's really complicated and he has to do things on his own timetable and what he feels comfortable with. And it certainly is easy for me to say what someone should be doing, that they should be louder or speaking out or fighting or what have you. But if they're all tied up in court and with all this legal craziness, and their lawyers are telling them, I would presume, you know, what they're telling Rekieta, what Rekieta's lawyers are telling him, shut up. You know, it's not for me to say. And so I've had to learn patience through this. But to, I guess, finally answer your question, I know that this Manson stuff is not, it doesn't open me up to a really big audience as things currently are. And I know that it probably in some ways seems like something as like, maybe it's time to just move on from, but I still really feel like this is a big fucking story, and that it's going to go somewhere interesting. And I don't know where that's going to be, and I don't know where Manson's going, but I just have this feeling. So, you know, I guess all of us in life, to some degree, we have to follow a gut instinct about things that are not always immediately apparent to us. So yeah, I guess if that answers it. The other thing I would say is this: I could never have done all of this stuff for like John Bon Jovi or something like that. So like, there is an extent to which, even though I didn't consider myself a Manson fan coming into this, and there's still a lot about like his art and the mythology of Manson that I don't know or understand or whatever, right? But I have really come to much more of an appreciation, not only for his past cultural impact, but for the fact that I do actually think that this is a really intelligent, maybe brilliant man who he's got a lot going on in his mind. And I think that he's still got a lot of really interesting things to do artistically and culturally. And I think that's someone that I want to be on board with, right? Because it's not just about some Me Too thing or some rock star, because there were a lot of people who've been Me Too'd and rock stars in trouble and stuff like that. And I'm not interested in covering their situations. But there is something I think really interesting about Manson's place in the culture and the art that he has done and is doing. And having watched some interviews with Manson and having talked to people who know Manson and learning more about what I think is his character and his mind, I think that he is one of those rare people in life who, how do I want to put this? There's a line in a Stephen King novel, the Stephen King novel Dreamcatcher, which is a really gross novel because I'll do a little detour here, but the characters, they catch this alien bug, this flu or whatever, that causes these big worm aliens to gestate in their digestive tract. And then the people start farting a lot. And then these things bust out of their anus. That's Dreamcatcher. It wasn't a very good movie. The book, I mean, I didn't think the book was very good, honestly. It wasn't Stephen King's best, but it had some gross moments, that's for sure. So if that sounds appealing to you, go check out Dreamcatcher. But there's a line in Dreamcatcher about a character who has this almost supernatural insight or real insight into things. He's someone who actually is cognitively disabled, right? Or what we would have called a long time ago retarded, mentally retarded, handicapped. But he has this gift of like insight, and the character and some of the characters will say about him, he sees the line. He sees the line. He sees the line. This is something that's repeated over and over. And what it means is basically like people who are able to look at all of the craziness and confusion of life and like all of the stuff that's out there and all the stuff that's being said and that's happening and going on and all of it, and they're able somehow to see like the truth or to see a deeper reality or to see the line. And so that's something that I feel about Manson and some other artists and people as well. But I do get that sense about him, and from interviews that I see, is that for all of his faults or stuff he's done in the past or whatever, but that he's one of these people who sees the line. And I think people like that are special and rare. And I think that I just don't think he's finished yet. I don't know how it's going to come about, but I don't think that we have seen his final big act yet. I think he's got a big third act in him in terms of his life, and one that could go on a long time. So I have a little more to say about that. I need to read some super chats. Let me I'm going to grab something to drink because my throat's kind of hurting. And then I will be back. Y'all can take a break. You want to do a 5-minute break? Let's do that. Let's do a 5-minute break, and then I'll be back. I'm going to say a little bit more about Manson, and then talk about RFK Jr. for a bit, and then a few things about Rammstein. Even if you're not interested in Rammstein, I think you'll be interested in this, because the journalist who's been attacking them the most is now like having these tantrums online, and things seem to be falling apart for his book. Anyway, but I want to say a few more things about Manson. I want to read your super chats and other things. I'll be back. So 5 minutes, coming back. All right. Sorry that took a little bit longer. I was saying goodnight to my boyfriend. My boyfriend. Y'all remember that video? I mean, this part's not funny, but y'all remember the video with the guy who was it Fernando Castillo, the guy who got shot by the cops at it was like a traffic stop? I mean, I don't even remember what happened there, but do you remember how his girlfriend was filming herself and she was like, "Oh, they done shot my boyfriend." And she sure seemed like a lot more interested in her moment of fame there filming filming this tragedy than actually concerned about her dying boyfriend. They done shot my boyfriend. Anyways, yeah. So let me look at your super chats and then I'll wrap this Manson stuff up. Well, we're gonna go for another half hour. It is late. I know it's late where some of y'all are. It's late here. It's 12:20, but okay. Oh yeah, we got that. All right. Thank you for that, Vanessa. They know that I'm not good about seeing comments. I'll go back through though and watch. I do watch my live streams often again and actually read all the comments. No, it's not the same. Colonel, you missed a few people asking specific questions in chat. Missy Jade asking the Manson doc name. Hey, I saw you when I got off here, Missy Jade, and you're one of the OGs, my supporters, and I know that you've been going through a rough time, and so I really hope that things are better, and if they're not, thinking about you. But let's see. I can go over the chat again in a second, but the Manson doc name. So I'm assuming you're talking about not the one I'm working on because I don't have a name for it yet, but the Channel 4 documentary that's coming out. So y'all know, Channel 4 is the British company that has already put out a number of Me Too, you could say hit jobs, Me Too documentaries. They did the Russell Brand two-parter that started all of his problems. They did the Kevin Spacey one that is now showing on HBO Max, and I think one or two others. So they've got a 3-part Marilyn Manson documentary, and it's going to come out there, I guess, in Great Britain, and then sometime after, like the Kevin Spacey one did, it's going to come out on a major US streamer. So I'm assuming HBO Max or Netflix or something. 3 parts, which is more than anyone has gotten so far. So that's interesting, right? Because these other guys have gotten like 1 or 2 parters, and so it's going to be a 3-part documentary. And it's going to, so far, what I'm hearing is that it's going to be called either Marilyn Manson Unmasked or Marilyn Manson Behind the Mask. And it's purporting to be not only about the allegations against him, and it'll be interviews with the accusers. Evan Rachel Wood apparently has some new allegations that she's making, and she's doing an interview. And so it's a whole new round with all that. But also it purports to be a biography of his life and his evolution as a person and an artist. So, I guess we prepare for the worst and hope for the best, although I don't have much hope that this is going to be a fair production. But, I guess you never know. They are, as I understand it, they did interview his attorney, and they interviewed a couple of people that I know and that I've also interviewed who are favorable to Manson's side. The question is, how much of that is going to get used? Because people were interviewed. These people, a lot of them were interviewed by Rolling Stone, and for their hit pieces on Manson and stuff. And, they only took like a sentence from some of these people. And so I don't know. I have heard that they are a bit pointed. They have been a bit pointed in their questions to these people, like seemingly more interested in the possible negative stuff, or trying to kind of twist things that people are saying in these interviews toward more negative assumptions. But I mean, I guess we'll see. But that's what you'd expect, right? So I don't know, but I hope that they make some kind of an effort, like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard documentary did. I know that a lot of us didn't like the way that certain things were depicted in that documentary, and look, I was in it, and I looked terrible. I was only in there for like 30 seconds, but there was a scene with me where I'm on Legal Bites during the trial, and I'm talking about how there's evidence that Johnny Depp kicked Amber, and they're trying to suppress it. And I was saying this really negative tone, and it's really going to hurt Johnny's case and stuff. Like, I mean, they took me out completely out of context and whatever, but it made it sound like I was saying, oh, there's this terrible evidence against Johnny, and thank God that's not going to get let into evidence and whatever, right? So, I mean, I came off terrible in it. But I will say this for that documentary series about Amber and Johnny is that I thought that they certainly spent a lot of time presenting and exploring Johnny's side of things. And there was a lot in there that made Amber look bad. And so, no, was it perfect? No. Did I like the way I came off in it? No. But I thought it was much, much fairer than I expected. And I even had some friends and family members who were not really familiar with the trial and hadn't followed it, who did watch that. And they came away thinking that it was more negative toward Amber even. So I wish that would happen with the Manson thing, but I don't know. I'm doubtful. But they're going to interview a number of the accusers, and there's going to be a few new things that Evan Rachel Wood is going to allege. I just wonder, y'all, though, I wonder if she's regretting this stuff now. I mean, she has not said a word. I am shocked. I tell you, I've been shocked several times in this whole thing over the last 3 years. And it's very humbling, by the way, to predict something or to think that you're very sure something is going to happen and then it doesn't happen. It's like makes you feel stupid, but it's good for Manson that this hasn't happened. I was sure that if he did announce a tour and music and all that this crazy woman would be on the warpath against him, would just be like constantly, berating her followers like she used to call the sheriff and all of that and crying and doing all these interviews and everything. And there's not been a fucking peep from that woman. I mean, from any of the accusers. Of course, a number of them have fallen off now, but there's not been a fucking peep from anyone really, except for just a few like woke journalists or what have you. I am shocked. So I just wonder if, look, the newness of this whole thing, this whole game is worn off. Everything gets old after a while, right? So I'm sure when she was going through that hardcore, feminist phase and Me Too was still very new and all of that, and that it was a lot of fun early on. But like after a while, the novelty wears off, the fun wears off, and then you have lots of big pains in the asses that you're having to deal with. Like this defamation suit or this lawsuit by Manson that she's still having to deal with to some extent, and being now associated with this like shady situation and negative things being brought up about her. Even if it's not widespread in the media, but look, when Ashley Smithline flipped, the Manson accuser that totally flipped for him and said that it was a hoax and Evan Rachel Wood pressured her to lie and stuff like that. When that happened, that did get a lot of coverage. It really did. And some of y'all remember this, like the mainstream publications, they covered it, and like big people like Candace Owens and stuff, whether you like her or not, she's covering it. Like it got attention, quartering. So, I mean, after a while, stuff like that, it does have an effect. And I just wonder if Evan Rachel Wood is not, she's getting older in Hollywood. She's a few years younger than me, right? But not much. But I mean, she's about to enter a middle-aged part of her career. And, it's challenging to some degree for women in Hollywood, particularly since a lot of her appeal used to be bound up with the fact of being this like young sort of, Lolita type or whatever. And I just wonder if she's not getting all the roles that she's wanting, or if things are not going as well as she would like with her career. And one of the things that she's hearing from her PR people or whatever is like, let's just tone it down with all this crazy Me Too Manson stuff, I don't know. I just find it very strange that she's not said a fucking word, unless there's something going on behind the scenes legally that we're not privy to. We don't know. I haven't seen it in the filings or heard anything, but like there's some kind of pressure legally that she's feeling, but I don't think so, because the defamation portion of his lawsuit against her was taken out by that judge, right, in California with those crazy anti-SLAPP rules. So like really, she shouldn't be afraid to defame him, Evan Rachel Wood. So anyway, that's a kind of a long way of telling you, though, that the topic is Marilyn Manson Unmasked. So it's either going to be Marilyn Manson Unmasked or Behind the Mask, I believe, is the title. Now, when do I expect this to come out? I have no idea. I've not heard anything, but I would expect it'll come out when it can do the most damage or get the most publicity. So I would expect that once Manson starts touring, if and when he releases new music, I don't know if he's going to release before the tour. I would assume he would, maybe not, but in the next couple of months, 2 or 3 months, there's going to be a lot more stuff happening on his end of releasing new music and of going on these tours and stuff. And so I would think that's when this documentary will come out. So we will see. All right. What was the other super chat? Vanessa, what were the other questions I missed? You know, hey, Missy, he says, hey, girl, I miss you. Remember when Ashley Smithline came forward? I thought that was a huge opportunity for everyone to expose the BS. Manson is something that is huge, in my opinion. Go with your gut. Yeah, thank you. I agree. And it's not all about whether or not it's going to turn into something huge anyway. I mean, you know, it's also just an interesting story. But no, I agree with you, and I feel the same way. Zach Villa, Colonel Kurtz. Sorry, my nose is getting worse. I need Rekieta to come over and party. Kaylee, new questions about Zach Villa. Okay. Let me see if there's any other super chats, and then I will find those comments, and then we'll move on. I can only definitely do another half hour, and so, but where's the other super chat? Did I miss it? I'm blanking on who Zach Villa even is. Who is Zach Villa? Is that someone I should know? Oh, Evan Rachel Wood's ex-fiance. Hold on a second. Let me find, I'll find a picture to show y'all. You know, one of the interesting things about Evan Rachel Wood, very, very strange, is that she mimics, like a lot of people, I think with her, we could say condition or whatever, she mimics the look of people that she is dating. I think people said Amber Heard did that too, right? But anyway, she was engaged to this guy, an actor. I think he played like the Night Stalker or something on one of the American Horror Stories. And so I remember reading somewhere that he had some negative stuff to say about her, or it was reported that he had been saying some negative things to people about her. But I don't think that there was ever anything really like concrete or big that came out about that. And they were engaged for a little while. Let me find your comment, Kaylee. I'm looking. Oh, and hello, Andrew Jacobs. I just noticed yours from a long, long time ago. Thank you. And by the way, my mods, if you'll have to go to bed, it's totally fine. If anyone has to go to bed, it's totally fine. Where are you? I'm looking now, Keely, for it. I should read more of my comments, but sometimes when I'm tired and stuff like tonight, it's just easier to run through. If someone wants to tell me again, I can't look through them again, but if someone wants to tell me here, what were the what was going on with Zach Villa? What's the point with that? Okay. I don't know how I feel about Robert Kennedy Jr., but there was a crazy hit piece against him by Vanity Fair that quoted people in his family. So apparently a lot of his family don't want him running, have issues with him. I don't know if it's legit or from jealousy or whatever. And he certainly has had, as he said, a crazy past or difficult past as a former heroin addict, an alcoholic, and sex addict. I think he's just flat out basically admitted to all of these things, right? But Vanity Fair brought up, it posted a picture of him posing with something that looked like the carcass. It could be the carcass, the cooked carcass of a dog at some kind of festival or fair. And he wasn't actually eating it, but it was like a joke. Like he was like smiling at the camera. And it was like this. Now I think he claims it's a goat. So I don't know, who the hell knows. But one of the allegations is that he might have, when he went to Asia many years ago, he might have consumed dog, as a part of like, that's something in some of the cultures there, right? That's a lot more acceptable. And that he might have done that or taken a picture with it for a joke. And anyway, so that was one of the things they were bringing up. Could this person have consumed a cooked dog at a festival somewhere in Asia? But then this is what I wanted to ask y'all about. A number of other allegations, but one of them was of what was being depicted as sexual assault where someone from decades ago in his past, a woman from decades ago when he was a young man, claimed that that he out of nowhere came up to her one night or one day, and they were at a party or they were hanging out at the house for some reason. And she claims that she was standing like away from him, like at a table or a counter, and he put his he came up to her close, and then he put his hands like first like on her waist, and then a hand started running up her leg, and then eventually like started touching her private parts. And and they didn't have any kind of like a relationship, a sexual romantic relationship prior to this. It seems like it was like a social occasion or whatever. And he was, I don't know, drunk or horny or whatever, and was coming on to her in this way. Now, this is my question, because this was something that came up with the Kevin Spacey topic as well. Because Kevin Spacey, in the interview that he did on Piers Morgan a couple of weeks ago, he did admit not to groping and not to groping genitals, but he did admit to, quote, being handsy sometimes in his romantic overtures, and that he expected that if those overtures were not welcome, that people would tell him, or they would resist, or whatever. They would push back or tell him or show their displeasure, right? So here's my question. When I was in college and in my 20s, and when I was like, as you say, like coming of age in terms of romantic or sexual relationships, experiences, or whatever, it was much more socially acceptable for someone to make a move on you with a physical, suggestive sexual touch. In other words, instead of saying verbally, can I touch you? Or are you sexually interested in me? Or do you want to fuck or whatever? Instead, in a particular moment in a social setting, perhaps, or whatever, just to come up to the person and to like romantically touch them, making an overture, right? And I'm not talking about touching their genitals. It was never, even in my day, it was not acceptable. And I'm talking, by the way, about, I'm talking about like the early 2000s, right? It was not acceptable ever to just come up to a woman and like stick your hand in her crotch. Of course not. Or in Kevin Spacey's case, if he was actually like coming up to men and just grabbing their genitals, right? He's not admitting to that, but I'm just saying that was, of course, not acceptable. But although, yes, it was not acceptable. Let's leave it there. But we would not have perceived it as sexual assault or even harassment in certain contexts, like if you're not at work, for instance, in certain contexts, to have someone make an overture that involved a sexualized touch, like touching you here or touching you on the leg or whatever. And then the idea being that it was then in the other person's court then to say, to like into it or yeah or whatever, or to be like, stiffen up, walk away, or no, or whatever, right? That was kind of, that was understood to be like, I think, an okay method of seduction and of gauging of interest. Because, for my generation, and maybe some of you can relate to this, there's often something jarring about speech. Speech can break the mood and it can be awkward. And that's, for a lot of people, one of the appeals of sexuality is that you kind of, it's one of the ways in our life in which we can get beyond the confines of the spoken word, in terms of like actual like language and so forth. And so I guess what I'm curious about is, do you think that it is wrong for someone to touch someone, even non-genitally, but to touch someone in a sexualized way if they do not know that it will be welcome? If in other words, they're like, it's like their idea of like a serve, an opening serve, or like putting interest out there, or trying to seduce someone, but in a way that's not disrespectful. Like, because when I guess what I'm saying is, when I read this allegation that decades ago, first of all, a very different period in time when mores were very different, expectations were very different, that decades ago, Kennedy comes up to someone and starts initially touching her here, and apparently there's no resistance, and then touching her in other places, and then gradually getting to the point then where you're touching someone's genitals. Like, to me, I just don't know that that's in the same realm as what we would think of as as what should be thought of as sexual assault, particularly if we're talking about a different time period. Now everybody understands, I guess, the rules are different. And so people know that they need to be more careful and that we need to have more respect for bodily autonomy, that's just where our society is at now, whether we like it or we don't like it or whatever, that's where we're at. And so I thought that was interesting, and I don't really have any vested interest in defending Kennedy, and I'm not going to do a video or anything on it. And, I'm sure he's done a lot of things, as he said, he's not a choir boy. I'm sure he's done a lot of distasteful things. But to me, that just seemed really kind of unfair and ridiculous. And what bothers me about the narratives right now that we're seeing with some of this stuff is that it puts then so much pressure then on the person who's making the first move to have like everything figured out, or to have checked in verbally with the person to make sure that they might be okay with some kind of a sexualized touch. And then it's like, okay, you start touching someone on the waist or whatever. If they're not giving you any cues that they don't want it, then I could see where you'd have an assumption then of like, okay, well, I'm going to continue, right? I mean, is that just crazy? I don't know. And this was even a problem that I had to a degree with some of the Weinstein allegations, not all. There's certainly some allegations where it sounds like he just basically like physically forced himself on women. But some of these situations, he clearly telegraphed what he was interested in wanting to do. And he invites them over to his hotel. They go to his hotel. He comes out, one woman's story, he comes out naked and she stays naked from the waist down, I think. And she sticks around. And then, another woman's story, he leads her to the bathtub, puts her down in the bathtub, undresses himself, starts doing stuff. I mean, and she just says, I just froze. And I get freezing if something's awkward or scary, but like, it seems like in a number of these cases, that there's just no responsibility taken by the woman in these situations for like, in this world, like, you have to kind of, to a degree, assert yourself, or it'll be perceived that you're liking something or you're okay with it. Is that just like an old dinosaur way of thinking on my part? Pyramid 7 says not crazy. Oh, there you are, Kelly. I think it's a read the room kind of thing. Like if you make nonverbal eye contact and are on the same page, then it's okay. But without warning, out of the blue is crass. Yeah, I mean, out of the blue definitely is. And maybe that's in some of these cases what we're talking about. And in cases too, where the men, if they were being the least bit perceptive, should know better, should know that it's not welcome. I mean, I certainly think that you have situations with men and women where people very much do want to proceed. And so they're not as observant of or receptive to little signals that, hey, maybe this person is not really as into it as I am, or maybe there's some discomfort or reluctance there, right? I mean, that's certainly, we've experienced that, a lot of us, and that certainly does happen. It is interesting, though, with Kennedy, how many people in his family seem to be fueling this also and coming after him. I always kind of wonder if there's some jealousy in that too, because let's face it, none of the Kennedys are relevant anymore. Speaking of relevant, except in a historical sense. And so they've got this one out here who's basically been kind of a bad boy in some ways, it sounds like, and has lived how he's wanted to, for the most part. And now not at the end of his life, but later in life, he's decided he's going to do something, really serious in politics. And a lot of people are flocking to him, or at least he's getting a lot of attention. And so I just wonder if people in his family too are like jealous. Okay, let me say the last thing about Rammstein, and then we're gonna go. So even if you don't care about this topic, German band Rammstein, the media tried really hard, particularly the German media, to get them and to get their lead singer. And basically everything just never amounted to anything or fell apart. But one of the main journalists, Daniel Drepper, who wrote a book entitled Row Zero, and the whole book is about Rammstein and these Row Zero parties where women are basically considered sex objects, for Till Lindemann and so forth. You have to watch my other videos if you care. But anyway, this guy, he went on, and so for this Row Zero, I should say, for this Row Zero book, he collected some stories from different women who claimed that they were uncomfortable at the Rose Zero parties, or yes, I had a consensual relationship with Lindemann, but there were power imbalances and et cetera, right? But basically a number of women whining about their experiences and making up a lot of shit too, I think. But he put this book together. There was a chapter in there on Marilyn Manson too that was totally out of place because there's no connection other than the fact that they're both rock stars who've been Me Too'd, I guess. But anyway, he went on a Twitter rant or a rant on Instagram, I think, this last week, and someone had to translate it for me. But basically, some of the stories in his book have been exposed now as being false, or he fucked up some stuff in some of the stories, and it's been exposed. And some of the women, a couple of women, have even come out and have complained about the way that they're depicted in his book, and so it's basically just fallen apart. And so he got on Instagram or Twitter and went on this rant about it. I mean, in writing, but went on this rant about it. And it was just funny to see, because the thing with the Rammstein thing is that it was so clear from the beginning that there was no there. It's not like with the Manson thing where you have, here's a, what we thought was a credible actress a while ago, and a number of other women coming out and saying, oh, he did really bad things to me, right? With the Rammstein thing, it was one obviously crazy attention-seeking girl claiming vaguely that she thought she might have been drugged by Lindemann, although she had absolutely no evidence of it. And then just a number then of other stories of women who had had consensual encounters with him or other band members, but realized later that there were power imbalances and stuff, and so they weren't comfortable and all that. There was never any there. It was always obviously just ridiculous, a tempest in a teapot. And the media, particularly the German media, the European media, they tried so hard to make it a thing. They tried so hard. But it wasn't even like a bump in the road really for Rammstein or Lindemann. I mean, they just went on touring, and now Lindemann is coming back in a month, and he's going to be touring by himself, solo, actually going to some of the same venues that Manson's going to be at. And so I think that some people like this journalist, they're very frustrated that despite their best efforts, these guys are still getting through their fingers, and some of this is starting to really, really fall apart. So I don't know. It's interesting. All right, let me look at some of your comments, and then we'll go. Yeah, I don't have my link up for donations, but if you want to check out my stuff, and thanks to the mods who have been posting the links. Missy Jade says, I can't believe what's happened with Rekieta. I've just found out. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story if you're interested in that kind of stuff, right? CTAM says Clinton actually got this country into a surplus at the end of the 90s. The debt was starting to shrink, and he's still younger than Biden. Clinton, I know his private life was kind of a mess, right? And I know that in his post-presidency years, he and Hillary Clinton, they may have had some shady stuff going on with that foundation. But yeah, he was a good president. I think he was a good president, and he was one of the few who did make a real effort to reduce the deficit, and he did. And now conservatives will remind us that he had the Newt Gingrich-led Congress breathing down his neck, and so give them some credit for that as well. That was an interesting period in history from that. But what's interesting about that is that's back then conservatives cared about the debt. And that's what was so disappointing about what happened with George W. Bush and then conservatives since then, is it seems like from that point on, conservatives just stopped even pretending to care about the debt. Whereas it used to be that conservatism was to some degree wound up with the idea of fiscal restraint. So anyway, yeah. Could Clinton, I think Clinton is so deep into the Me Too or Epstein shit that he would not be received back into the game now. But no, that's true. Money printer, go Burr. Yep. Ron Paul was right about a lot of his critiques about the Federal Reserve, dude. So much power, so little accountability. Yes, Quentin George, I'd love to get a Gen X president in the White House. Michael Brown, I am 43 as well, about to turn 44. And so apparently we are at the tail end of Generation X and at the very beginning of the millennials. So I forget when the cutoff was exactly, but like we're right on it, which is interesting because I really feel like in a lot of ways, that's how I perceive myself. I don't know how you feel, but in a lot of ways, very fractured between two perspectives on the world. Because on the one hand, we remember a time before cell phones and before computers or the widespread use of computers and computers in the home. A time mostly before the internet, and much more of an analog time, right? And also a time with some more traditional, let's say, attitudes. And yet also we were coming of age, in our late teens, early 20s, when these things were starting to appear and come about, right? And so we are in some ways like the dinosaurs who remember the old time, but also the very beginning of the new perspective. And so I think that makes me feel at times in a way very fractured. And I'm sure other people can identify with that almost like you're like pulled between two worlds that don't really go together, right? And of course, there's a lot of nostalgia for the past that I'm sure you feel, because I feel it. I feel it too. Missy Jade says he's doing so well and is beefed up. Oh, who are y'all talking about? I don't know. I'll have to go back over this. Missy Jade, I promise I'm going to go back over these comments and see what all y'all said and talked about, and then I'll get back to you. Yeah. All right, it's getting late. Thank you again to all of you who stuck around, and to my mods who stayed up late for this, and everybody. And my plan for content, I am continuing to work on my Marilyn Manson documentary. I think you'll like it. But in the meantime, I'm going to try to do more streams like I'm doing now. I'm trying to step up my content. Things have been a little bit better with work and stuff outside of this, and things have calmed down a bit in my life. So I'm going to try to put out more content. And then also, they don't do as well, but view-wise, but maybe more stuff that's focused on like film and art, a bit more of that. But we'll see. Anyway, I love y'all. Thank you so much. I'm going to read the chat after this. I appreciate you. All right. Bye, everybody.